The big question: human peak performance across various life stages, challenging the common misconception that all abilities decline after the 20s.
So here's a question for you. Have you ever wondered if you've already hit your peak? We're always told there's this one single moment when we're at our absolute best. But what if the real story is a lot more complicated and, honestly, a lot more exciting? Let's find out. Okay, to really get into this, let's start with a fun thought experiment. Picture it, a race. On one side, you have a 21-year-old Usain Bolt, this young guy full of raw talent. On the other, a 31-year-old Usain Bolt, a seasoned, decorated champion. Who wins? Who crosses that finish line first? Well, the numbers don't lie. At just 23 years old, Bolt ran the 100-meter dash in a mind-blowing 9.58 seconds. It's a world record that he would never, ever beat again in his entire career. So for that pure, explosive speed, his peak was absolutely in his early 20s. Hearing that, you might think, oh great, so it's all downhill from 23? It can feel a little bit depressing, right? Well, I was pretty relieved to find out that the answer is a huge, emphatic no. Turns out we have so many different peaks still ahead of us. So here's our game plan. We're gonna take a journey through our whole life, starting with childhood, then the explosive 20s, the endurance age of the 30s, and into the wisdom that comes in middle age and beyond. And we'll wrap up with how you can keep on climbing. So let's get into it. This isn't about finding one single peak. Think of it more like a grand tour of a whole mountain range of them, exploring just how incredible our potential is at every stage of life. This timeline gives you a fantastic bird's-eye view of our journey. Each part of your life has its own kind of superpower. In childhood, it's all about learning and recovery. In your 20s, it's speed and mental sharpness. Your 30s brings strength and stamina. And later on, wisdom and even happiness. Okay, let's start at the very beginning. Childhood isn't just about playing around. It's when we're literally building the fundamental circuits in our brains and bodies that are gonna serve us for our entire lives. Remember having just endless energy as a kid? That's because your resistance to fatigue and your ability to recover are at their absolute lifetime best. Your body is crazy flexible. And here's the really cool part. Your brain has these critical periods, these little windows of time where it's just perfectly wired to soak up new skills, which is why it's the best time to become fluent in a language or pick up an instrument. All right, next up, our 20s. This is the decade that gets all the hype, right? The one we all think of as our prime. And for good reason. It's when our bodies and our minds are basically built for speed. Just how fast are we talking? Well, one study actually looked at the reaction times of video game players and pinpointed the absolute peak at age 24. This raw processing speed is exactly why athletes in super explosive sports like sprinting often hit their peak in their mid-20s. And mentally, that speed has a name: fluid intelligence. Think of it like your brain's raw processing power. It's RAM. It's that ability to solve a totally new problem or learn something from scratch. It's that feeling of just being incredibly sharp. And yeah, it peaks in your early 20s. And then you hit your 30s. All of a sudden, a night out might mean a 2-day recovery, and all your friends are suddenly talking about their new air fryers or running marathons. It really feels like a shift. And it is. It's a shift away from that explosive power and towards something else: endurance. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. There's a super clear trend in endurance sports. The peak age for a marathoner? It's right around 30. But look what happens when the distance gets longer. For a 100-kilometer ultramarathon, the peak age is about 35. For a brutal 100-mile race, it climbs all the way up to 37 or even 39. And get this, it's not just about stamina. What about just pure raw strength? Well, in a sport like powerlifting, the average peak age is around 35. So that whole idea that it's all downhill after your 20s, the data just doesn't back it up at all. Okay, so what happens when we get to the second half of life? We've peaked in speed, then we've peaked in strength and endurance. What could possibly be left? Well, the answer is a different, and you could argue much more powerful kind of intelligence. I want you to meet crystallized intelligence. If fluid intelligence is your brain's super fast processor, think of this as your brain's enormous, ever-expanding hard drive. It's not about raw speed. It's about being able to pull from a lifetime of knowledge and experience to see the big picture and solve really complex problems. So this shows you the big trade-off that happens as we get older. You're not losing intelligence. It's just changing its shape. You're swapping some of that raw processing speed from your 20s for this deep, interconnected web of knowledge that you can only get from, well, living life.
And this has huge real-world consequences. Forget that stereotype of the tech genius being some kid in a hoodie. Research actually shows the average age of a successful startup founder is 45. And why is that? Because building a company needs exactly this kind of crystallized intelligence. You need a deep understanding of an industry, of people, of how things work. But maybe the most surprising peak of all isn't physical or intellectual, it's emotional. There's this really fascinating, though sometimes debated, theory that suggests our happiness follows a U-shape over our lives. It dips in middle age, and then it actually peaks in old age. Now, it's a complicated picture, for sure. Data from the European Social Survey shows that things like your health, your income, and your friends are obviously huge factors. But when researchers adjust for all those variables, that U-curve does seem to pop up. It suggests that older people who stay healthy and connected are often the happiest people of all. So, armed with this amazing knowledge that we have a lifetime of different peaks, the last question has to be, what can we do about it? How can we make sure we keep climbing no matter how old we are? Look, some decline with age is gonna happen, but it is not a fixed destiny. The research points to a really clear strategy for aging well. First, you gotta take care of your physical health. That means activity, diet, sleep. Second, take care of your mental health, staying social, managing stress. And third, you have to keep learning, constantly challenging your brain with new stuff. And this isn't just wishful thinking. Our bodies and our brains have this incredible ability to adapt and get better with training at any age. The most powerful idea here is that it's truly never too late to start climbing toward a brand new peak. So, instead of worrying about some single peak you think you might have already passed, the real takeaway from all this is a question for you. Knowing you have a whole lifetime of potential still ahead, what new peak will you climb towards?